Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome to Spirit Speakeasy. I'm Joy Giovanni, Joyful Medium. I'm a working psychic medium, energy healer, and spiritual gifts mentor. This podcast is like a seat at the table in a secret club, but with mediums, mystics, and the spiritual luminaries of our time. So come behind the velvet ropes with me and see inside my world as I chat insider style with profoundly gifted souls. We go deep, share juicy stories, laugh a lot, and it wouldn't be a speakeasy without great insider secrets and tips. You might even learn that you have some gifts of your own. So step inside the Spirit Speakeasy. Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome in for another episode of Spirit Speakeasy. As promised, we are going to be again sprinkling in some guest readings, and I have got amazing guests coming up for you. Today's guest is so fun. Her name's Jennifer Page. I'm going to bring her in and introduce her in just a minute. She has such a unique vibe, a unique way of working, an incredible voice. I actually found her through her podcast, I Talk to Ghosts, which is spooky and cool, and she does ghost stories and also readings on there. So I'll link all of that in the show notes. We really dive in and talk about it. We talk about her journey. And funny enough, those of you that are kind of regulars with me know that I've been spending a lot of time at Disney, and she has a Disney story that cracked her gifts wide open from the time she was 2. So that's going to get shared, her podcast details and how she came to be doing that and her focus. So there's so much we're going to dive into. You are not going to want to miss this conversation with the amazing spirit medium, Miss Jennifer Page. Welcome into another episode of Spirit Speakeasy. I am very excited. We are back to having some guest episodes. Our guest today is Jennifer Page. Jennifer is a professional spirit medium and spooky podcaster. Having grown up in multiple haunted houses, she has been fascinated by ghosts her entire life, she says. Being a green witch, she loves to connect the spooky with the spiritual and shares both topics on her podcast, I Talk to Ghosts. Jennifer lives in the Pacific Northwest with her partner Maxwell and their black cat Amulet. Welcome, Miss Jennifer Page.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so happy to have you here. I'll tell everyone I just had to hit record because we were just saying hello and I was already wanting to dive into your story. I saw on your website that you started experiencing, I call them spirit people, but ghosts when you were 2. Is that right?
Yeah. My first memory actually was seeing a ghost while my family was at Disney World.
Wow.
And I was freaking out on the Pirates of the Caribbean, and they thought it was because of the ride. And I was seeing a spirit that came and approached our boat and jumped in our boat with us.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was crazy. Very spooky.
Looking back, do you feel like that was perhaps someone that had helped to create the ride? Was it a spirit person of someone that was on the boat with you guys? Were you ever able to piece it together?
I haven't really. Some people have told me that at one point Disney had real skeletons on that ride. And I've never confirmed that, but I find that very interesting. And I think someone else told me that there was a worker who haunted the ride named George, and it could have been him. It wasn't anyone menacing. He was just standing there. He locked eyes with me, and as our boat approached, he came closer to the edge of the platform and he jumped into the boat with us.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes joke with people and say, I think sometimes the spirit people can see that we have some sort of little light bulb on our head if we can become aware of them. And they're like, oh, she sees me, go to her.
Absolutely. You have to think that those who have mediumistic gifts must be some sort of beacon in some way.
Yeah, they must be able to tell somehow, right?
Yes.
And you said you've lived in several different houses that had a lot of spirit activity too. How interesting. I don't know. I was going to say how fun, but I don't know if it was fun or not, I guess.
Right. Well, you certainly have to have the right mindset for it, right? Including my current house, there's been activity. And me and my partner had talked about when I first started exploring mediumship, we were concerned that this would actually amp it up.
Oh,
But
interesting.
but we have found that it's actually quieted it down and dampened it and I think that's because I'm claiming my energetic space. And when I am connecting with the spirit world, I'm sending all that love and energy out and it's filling my space. And then, of course, I'm thanking them and telling them to go when I'm finished. So I do feel like that was an unexpected factor in it. But yeah, everything in this house, from objects moving, objects disappearing and reappearing, disembodied voices, footsteps, you name it. Yeah.
So interesting. And I always feel like it's interesting to hear someone else say it because I've had it in several different houses too. So it's kind of, I think it can be a common thing for some of us to experience.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, there's a big gap of time between that first encounter when you were two and these recent encounters. How did you start to understand your gifts, especially as a young person?
Um, Geez, I didn't think that experiencing any kind of paranormal activity had any reflection on me. I assumed that this was sort of how the world worked. And I've always been this imaginative, creative person who was drawn to, the magic books and fairies and energy. And I thought everyone was that way because it's
Yeah.
just so interesting. How could you not be? And I grew up very shy, and I realize now that it was because I was empathic and not
Yeah.
understanding being overridden by that energy, and that kind of makes you retreat more into the fantasy world as well, and living that kind of enchanted life. And it just was always a part of my life and a part of my interests. And then growing up, all of my friends would always be like, "Oh, you're psychic. Oh, you're psychic. How did you know that? Oh, you're being weird again." And it was kind of, the running joke. When I was 13 was the first time that I encountered someone doing tarot readings. And I was like,
Wow.
wait, this is real. This is real. I need to learn everything. And I did. And
Okay.
I've been reading tarot ever since. I love divination work. And that's really kind of how I structured my life, pulling in elements that intrigue me from all kinds of different modalities. And then a couple of years back, I got into a minor car accident and it left me with a lot of neck and back pain.
Hmm.
And I had experience in the past experimenting with healing energy on others, and it had worked. And I was so desperate at that point. I was like, I need to try this. And, looked up a couple of YouTube videos, just sent love and energy to my neck. And the next day, it felt better. And
Wow.
that catapulted me on a whole journey to discover Reiki and
Yeah.
energy work. And then the pandemic hit, and I was offering a lot of remote energy sessions. And in that space, that's when spirit started showing up in my energy sessions. And that started a whole nother path.
It's so fascinating to me sometimes how there are so many common threads with either the universal divine truths that come in, or you don't know this about me, but that's sort of how my gifts started to present themselves as well, was doing healing Reiki sessions for clients, and then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, there's a person standing next to me. Like, what is
Exactly.
happening? uh,
Exactly.
how
Um,
beautiful that you're able to offer healing. And I love the way that you brought that up too, because yes, there are amazing healing systems like Reiki,
mhm.
but anyone can just send, hands-on love and healing, and bring in that energy for themselves too. So how powerful is that?
Yeah, I think it's human nature that we like the structure and the certainty of rules and how to do certain things, and this is how you're trained, and you get the certificate and they pat you on the head and you push you out the door and you feel validated, right? But it's older than that. It's beyond language. It's beyond a textbook, and it's how we express ourselves through our language and our teachings and our common acceptance of things. It's how we can relate to each other. That's the structure in it. But it's not the words that are necessarily important. It's the intention and the energy and the emotion and certainly the love
Yeah.
that goes into everything.
Well, I think it's just even in the Reiki journey itself, just isolated, it's so amazing how, as a healer or even a person who's just undertaking healing, we can put that energy there. We can move the chi in someone, and then they're experiencing things as well in their
Yeah.
body or around them. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And the more you explore that and have your own personal experiences, that's where you really learn. And because you're interacting and it's happening, and it becomes more real than someone just telling you a story of what happened to them. And it's just, there's something just so magical about all of it. It will never not surprise me. It'll never get old. It's just every time, it's just so fascinating. And it's so great to be able to share it with someone else. Anyone can go to an energy session and have an experience and not be skilled in
Totally. Yeah.
that practice. So, but we can share it together. And it's so wonderful that someone just gets this spark, this glimpse of, oh my goodness, this worked for me. What else does that mean?
Yeah, that's such a good point because it is often someone coming for the first time, whether it's an energy session or whether they're just attending like a group reading. It
Mm-hmm.
just kind of, like you said, sparks a little curiosity, a little
Mm-hmm.
interest. And I love the way you were talking about how you really were drawn to tarot when you realized it was, available and started kind of the way I think of it as like my own little personal Easter egg hunt of like learning whatever draws your curiosity, adding it to your toolbox of what you know how to do. What else did you dive into after tarot through your journey?
Oh, geez.
I know all the things, right? I'm so curious about your green witchdom too.
Yes, I love my version of what it means to be a green witch is I love working with nature energy, and that includes herbs, plants, crystals, energy, animal spirits, all of that. And yes, that's another avenue I went down, herbology. And in fact, like I have so many here. I've got like lavender, I
Love
have
it.
wormwood here and skullcap. And
Oh, I love it.
I bring them into my readings as well, just when I'm setting an intention. Lavender is really great for spiritual work, bringing in calming, tranquil energy. And it's also known to um, let a spirit know that they're welcome and invited. Same with wormwood. And I just love that all these things kind of dovetail into themselves.
Yeah.
And I love working with crystals. Like I got my sodalite right here.
Oh,
This
very
one I've,
cool.
I've kept around lately because it's just so calming. And it's just, it's like, okay, let's ground. Let's reach out at the same time. Let's just connect and be here. And this stone really helps with that. And it's funny how things will come in and then phase out, and then it's something else. And I don't think there's any right or wrong to it. It's what feels right. And we need to trust that in ourselves.
That's such a good point. And I feel like it's that balance, right? Of that dogmatic, like, these are the rules, this is how we use this. And I just feel like, girl, you can't see it right now, but right off camera, I have a jar of drying yellow rose petals. I'm a little
Oh,
bit witchy too. It just, just in a different way, maybe.
not
Um,
surprising.
and it's wonderful that we can, I mean, so much permission, right, within
Mm-hmm.
ourselves just to say, oh, I feel like wearing this today, or I feel like slipping this little stone in my pocket, or like you said,
Yeah.
keeping a little, oh, I want this little jar of lavender close by today.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
wonderful to have all that permission to infuse that
Well,
day to day, totally different ways.
hmm ultimately, it starts with us, right? It starts with you and your energy and how you are interacting with the universe. And yes, it is great to be guided and understand, am I in the right space? Am I there? And other different, like how to work with each Claire. Um, but that leads me to think, someone asked me once, do you watch a lot of other mediums work in their videos? And I have seen a few, and I've even attended a few like online readings and things like that. But ultimately, you're going to be your own self, and you don't want to fall into that comparison game, because that's really dangerous. Say, oh, I wish I got names, or I wish I had more auditory signals coming through, or oh, I never get symbols. How come I don't get symbols? It's like, but yeah, but what about all the amazing things that are uniquely yours that you're bringing in? And I also think that that's part of being a medium. Who crosses your path and why, and what is the timing with it? And even when I do tarot readings, it's like, ooh, of all the tarot readers out there, you felt you discovered me, you decided to book with me, and you decide to book with me now. Why? And it's just so intriguing to find those answers.
I'm sure you get this too, but one of my favorites is when someone's like, I don't even quite know how I found you, or I just
Ah,
felt drawn to you. Cause it's like, okay, that's if it's mediumship, I'm like, that's probably your spirit people knowing that I'll be able to understand them. Because, like you were saying, it's sometimes it's our soul, sometimes it's the spirit world knowing, oh, okay,
mm-hmm.
Jennifer is going to be able to understand this and this and this about me because of her life experience, whereas perhaps someone else wouldn't understand it in quite the same way.
Exactly. I love that.
Did you, so you were working in your earth-based witchcraft practice before you came to mediumship? Is that I mean, obviously
Mm-hmm.
it's been with you all along, as these things are not so black and white, but
Yeah. From as long as I can remember, um, it just seemed, pardon the pun, natural for me. So yeah, I can't imagine, I can't find that separation of when that started. It's
yeah.
just, it's kind of like, when did you first develop a sense of humor? It's like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I think there was a lot of us as little kids pulling grass and sticks and rocks and making weird concoctions in our yards that we are like, I
Absolutely.
don't know why I'm doing this. I just feel like it.
Right? Or that tree feels happy, or this one seems sad, it's not getting the attention it needs. And, those sort of things. Or making up stories about the animals and, what I would do if I lived in a cottage in the woods, and all
Yes.
sorts of imaginative play.
And it's so true because, as we know, imagination is so blended in with our spiritual gifts. And I think it's one of the biggest things that confuses people when they're just new in either psychic work or mediumship, is that they it can feel a little bit like we're making things up, but it's like, oh
Hmm.
no, it's so intertwined with our imagination and with our creativity.
Absolutely. To me, it's the same thing. Your mind's eye, what you see in your mind, how you daydream, what you imagine, running scenarios, everything. If you get a visual message from the spirit world, it's the same vehicle. It is
Yeah,
the same thing.
absolutely.
And it's funny to me that in our culture, we don't think being able to picture something in our mind is anything magical. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you quantify that? How do you scientifically say this thought is this image and I can hold it in my hand? You can't.
Yeah.
And, so much of mediumship is so unknown and uh, ephemeral that, but we're using these gifts every day. Um, you can hear your own voice in your head. A lot of people say that when they hear auditory spirit, that it is in their own voice. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same vehicle. And I think that what makes a good medium is that they are skilled at sitting and quieting everything down and opening up so that spirit can use our telephone,
Yeah.
can use our mind's eye. And I equate it to, if you're blasting heavy metal music, you're not going to hear whispering in the next room. Or if your emotions are really heightened, if you're stressed, if you're happy, if you're sad, if you're grieving, you're overloading your sensory system with your own information. And a medium needs to be able to quiet the channels so that others can use it.
That's such a great way to explain it. And I feel like, especially when we're working with a client who's grieving, for example, and they're saying, "Oh, I don't
Yeah,
feel my person." And I always tell them it's often because their emotions are just so loud in their space.
exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
that's it's such an important thing to remember, I think. And, as as mediums learn to discern, right? Like what's information that's coming in from outside of myself, what's coming from inside of myself. Am I
Mm-hmm.
just making my grocery list? Is this is this important
Right.
information, from somewhere else? Um,
Yeah.
do you have a personal practice that you do, just in your own spiritual work regularly?
Um, I meditate a lot, but I started that before mediumship as well. I just had a lot of natural anxiety trying to navigate this world in its material form. And one day I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I found the Calm app, and I use it every day since. And I feel like because of that, it's helped me with grounding and centering. And it's almost like the universe sets you up for all these little things, right? And then
Totally.
boom, you're there. So, yes, I do like to meditate every day. I do like to be present and um, just touch in with those aspects of spirituality, because the normal busy world that we're in is so loud, it can almost make it seem like what you see is what you get, and that's it. And I hate feeling disconnected. And I also struggle with the going back and forth, the dealing with the laundry and the bills and the traffic jams, and then, whoop, nope, suddenly you're a spiritual being. And I have to
Yeah.
find that balance and maintain it, because otherwise, if too much time passes, it feels like the further away I am from it. And maybe it was my imagination, even though how could it possibly be? But you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
need to make those connections for yourself so that you're in a comfortable place and you have that balance going for you.
It's it's so important too. Obviously, we still are feeling people and are I think everyone's an empath. Some
Mm-hmm.
people know it and some people are
Mm-hmm.
not, don't like that word or don't identify that way. But like you said, the world outside is so noisy just with the energy, the emotions, the everything, especially now with all this sometimes wonderful and sometimes terrible social media,
Yeah.
thousands of emotions coming at us all at once. So you're right. It's so important to find that separation for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also the other thing I like to do is I love to learn. You know, we're never done.
Yeah,
And there's always another viewpoint or another way of looking at something or another technique. And it's just always so curious to see what else someone is doing, whether it's like listening to your podcast or reading a book or watching a YouTube video or reading a medium's blog. All of those things are just, it's nice to not only get someone else's perspective, but know you're not alone in your journey. And
that's so
it's
true.
unspoken encouragement, you know?
Yeah. And it's fascinating just because just like we're all different people in the world, are even as our spiritual gifts present, they all show up slightly differently, slightly different times. Some people like you at 2 years old at a theme park, some people like me in their 30s doing Reiki, some people, at different times in between through tragedy, through illness, all different ways. And I think it's so important to know that there's not just one way, right? All roads.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And again, it's not the comparison game, you know.
Absolutely.
Everyone is different, and it's going to be different, and that's good. It's good to have variety, and there is no top-notch, this is the way, this is better. this is better is, I think that's easy for us to be critical of ourselves. And it's like, you can only be who you are where you're at right now, in this physical timeline of things. And that's part of being here. So it's like, don't agonize over that. You signed up for it.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, it's so important to be processing our own like personal emotions, and as things come up in our lives too, that can color our work or make us feel more connected, less connected,
Yeah.
as we go. So we're not static beings either. We continue to grow and
exactly.
evolve.
Yeah.
I'm so curious. So let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about your podcast, I Talk to Ghosts.
Okay.
Obviously, you talk to ghosts, so pretty clear why that name makes sense for you. How did you decide that you wanted to start doing that? Did that come along before you were developing your mediumship?
Oh, that's a great question, because I had a podcast before with my partner, Maxwell, and the podcast was called Odd Tonic. And it was kind of a paranormal, weird history, strange science type of podcast. And we really loved it.
Are you guys still doing that one?
No, we had to put it on hold a couple of years ago. And I really missed podcasting. And I wanted to do something spooky. I wanted to tell ghost stories. And I thought for the longest time, well, it's going to be short. It's not going to have, I don't want to not be able to commit. I don't want to be overwhelmed by it. And a couple years back, I'm pulling out of the driveway and one spring day, and I get the suggestion, why not call it I Talk to Ghosts? And I was like, yes, I love that. Thank you, imagination. And I told my partner, I'm going to call my podcast I Talk to Ghosts. And he's like, okay, I love the name, but you don't.
And by the, do you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I was, by the time I started recording and sharing ghost stories, I was at that point on the road practicing learning mediumship. And I got to the point where Maxwell was like, you got to start recording and sharing your readings on your podcast. And of course, the human freak out. No, I couldn't. Okay, let me listen and think for a second. And so it all kind of came together that way. I had concerns that, most podcasts, they're either spooky and paranormal or they're spiritual. They're not both. And it's like, but I love both. There's got to be other people out there who love both. And luckily, there are.
So many, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you, because I just know all of our listeners here are going to be so excited to have both in one place.
Mm-hmm.
So for those that don't know your podcast, typically in the first half, one of the things that's so cool is you have such a beautiful voice, and even the tone when you're reading the stories. I believe it's people sending their stories to you and then you're reading them, right?
Yes.
And then in the second half, Jennifer does actual live mediumship readings with clients often. So it's so cool to have the blend of the two in there.
Yeah, I love offering an avenue where someone can sign up to possibly get a free reading on the podcast or not. But yeah, to be able to share a reading, it takes some of the mystery out of it. And I can appreciate that booking a medium reading could be intimidating. You don't know what to expect. And honestly, I don't know what to expect either sometimes.
I always say that. It's different for me every time, so I can tell you the basics. But
absolutely. So for people to see my work, see how I operate, hopefully get to know me a little bit as well, it's just wonderful to be able to share that. And I also feel when I'm doing a reading, I'm listening to what spirits are saying too. And we all can learn from these lessons and stories and knowledge that is being passed on, and the emotional connection, and just hearing even your sitter's story of things that they've gone through in life. It's just a wonderful way to connect, and it's an honor, really. And I am always so thankful that they're willing to trust me with that, and in an area of vulnerability, you know.
Absolutely, especially to be recorded and have it, broadcast far and wide.
Sure. Yeah, but
Definitely.
I do tell everyone, it's like, if this is too personal, just let me know. If you decide later, just let me know. If at the very end you decide, please don't share this, I completely respect that. Why
Oh, that's
wouldn't
so
I?
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, so I always make that clear that um, it's completely up to them what they
That's
would
so
like shared or
special.
not.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you share that because that goes to your integrity as a worker too, and to to the spirit side, that they know
Hmm.
that they can share whatever they need to in that person's reading, and that ultimately you'll honor,
Yeah.
how the person feels.
Yeah.
And again, like you were saying, it can, I think there was a time where I had no idea that mediumship was even like a thing in the reading sense or group readings or any of that. And it would have been very intimidating and scary. And I think often people don't know even like what types of information might
Hmm.
come about. I know people often misunderstand and think we might be telling them something scary about the future, when really, just like in your, I don't know if it was this last one or one of the most recent ones, that someone's mom or aunt was just sharing that they like to give them these certain cookies and this candy, and they
Hmm.
had soda at their house, and
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
little, memories that are touching to the individual, touching the heart, but not, it's not scary
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And evidential mediumship, those little details that don't line up for anyone else, and the order things come in, and when, and the timing of it, they all seem to make sense. There's usually like an emotional connection with the cookies or the treats or that time they spent together. The smallest things can
Yeah.
mean so much. And I love when that comes in, because that means all the more that their loved ones really are still with them and they're connected.
It's my favorite thing probably about evidential mediumship is it is those very small details that are like important to us as an individual hearing from our person, when to look at it
Mhm.
from the outside you're like, okay, well, but your person on the other side knows the most important
Mhm.
things, knows how you would remember them, identify them. um, and sometimes if someone doesn't really isn't versed in this work or whatever, they might think, oh, that's general, but the truth is none of it's general. They're all very specific, detailed messages, which
Mhm.
is so special. And I also always think it's funny that it's usually almost nothing you could ever Google or find online
Oh yeah,
or anything like
exactly.
that.
Exactly. And like, you get 5 or 6 different little details, and like I see it like kind of like a putting on this transparency and holding it up to someone's like, will these things line up? Because they're not lining up
Yeah.
for me. I've never gone ice fishing, that
Yeah,
sort
for
of thing.
sure.
And sometimes you even feel silly. Like, recently, someone asked me to do a spirit reading for a pet dog that they lost. And the dog immediately came through with a personality. And then I'm like, oh, it's showing me a ball. And then my logical brain is like, of course there's a ball. But I'm like, I'm going to say it anyway. I'm having this whole conversation with myself. And I said, okay, I know this seems typical, but he's showing me that he had a toy ball. And she's like, he did. This dog didn't like to play with toys, but it had a ball. So it was very specific and it was meaningful. And I'm so glad I didn't doubt and second guess myself that that information wasn't, you know, um, specific enough, because in the
Yeah.
end what I was judging as very broad in general was actually really specific.
The most
And
important thing, it sounds like,
yeah,
too.
and it delighted me. And I think that's a lesson from spirit too, that
Yeah.
it's like, you see, just say it. Trust. You got to trust in the process and just deliver what you're given.
It's
And
so important. Yeah. We
mm-hmm,
have a lot of other medium friends that listen. And I feel like often people who aren't in this work don't realize that, like you just said, it's so cool that you pointed that out, because there are these little back and forth conversations we have with whether it's a soul of a person or a pet or whatever, of like, I don't, is that really like,
right.
is
Oh
that really what
yeah.
I'm saying? Or is there something
Oh,
more specific? Or,
it's so important that the person you're reading for gets the reading that they need. You can't help as a human being to put that pressure on yourself to sometimes, but like you got to realize that that pressure isn't helping anything. And the more I
yeah,
can tell myself, like, trust the spirit world, let them lead the reading. It's not up to you. In fact, it's insulting to say it's all on your shoulders because you have this whole team of
totally.
universe behind you. And it's like, okay, gotta let go of the wheel. Gotta just trust is just so important in the whole process. And the fact that your sitter has to trust you, you have to trust yourself, you have to trust the spirit world. I say that every reading, that it's like, this is all about trust, and it needs to be there, and that is never lost on me. And it's beautiful that that's how it needs to exist.
Yeah. Well, and the spirit world has such an intelligence with them as well, that even if, I'll speak for myself, even if I'm
Mm-hmm,
misunderstanding a detail, I totally at this point trust that they'll continue to work
mm-hmm,
with me to help me understand more specifically what that meant, or where I misunderstood them, or,
mm-hmm,
maybe I had one recently that was, I mistook a police officer and he was actually a military officer. He was
mm-hmm,
an officer, and I just was like, they said no to police officer, and I was like, okay, give me 1 second here, he's gonna help me
mm-hmm,
understand. And so
mm-hmm.
we are human, and it's like you said,
Yeah,
definitely not all for us on our shoulders.
yeah. And I try not to translate because I'll guess wrong,
Yeah,
so I usually just say, this is what I'm seeing, how can
yeah,
you connect this? Because if I sit here and guess it, what this means, oftentimes I'm just wrong. And it's like, oh, I don't want to put the wrong in there either. So I'd rather
yeah.
just deliver it straightly how it is.
Well, again, it's why the emotional component is so important, because
Mm.
the emotion really is what helps us understand all of it, everything, how they
Hmm.
felt, how, are they at work, are they in trouble, what's going on
Hmm.
here.
Hmm. Right. That's a really good point. That if I get a visual, I'll usually sit with it and go, okay, what's the emotion surrounding this visual? And a new story unfolds around it. And that's always really, really interesting to witness.
Yeah, it's so, and I feel like no two, I mean, well, just like no two people are like, no two readings are like. You had
Hmm.
another one, I think it might have been, no, it was a different gal, and it was her pet that was communicating, and they were wanting to talk about their pet sibling at
Oh,
home, their other black and white dog that lived
yes.
with them.
Uh huh.
I think it's
Yeah.
so cool sometimes when they'll also bring up, their beloved family who's still here on this side, and share about them. Even pets. A lot of people don't realize. I love that you will work with animal souls too, because not everyone has different feelings about them, but I love
I'm
them.
yeah, I'm new at it. The first time I actually reached out to someone for a free reading, it was over, she signed up by email, and I reached out to her, and she's like, "Well, it's actually my cat who passed away, and I live in Argentina." And I'm like, "Oh, I've never done a pet reading. Sure, let's see." you know. And her cat came in with so many visuals, like, I see your cat laying on your homework, and doing this and doing that. And there was a moment where the cat was like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed now, but near the end of my life, I was messy." And my sitter was like, "Oh, I would have taken care of her. I cleaned her up. I fed her by hand. I did anything she needed." And the cat was just expressing how the gratitude.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people wonder, well, animals don't speak English. How do you get all of this? And it's like, it's through the emotion, it's through the visual. So many times when I'm communicating with a human spirit, they're not talking to me in English either. I've done readings for people in other countries. There was one woman who was in India, and her boyfriend wanted a reading, and he didn't speak English at all. And of course, his father, who had passed, didn't speak English either. And she translated for her boyfriend, and it worked just fine.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that if you open yourself wide and just trust and see what comes in, it's amazing to just, you're just so moved when something like that happens, because it's that extra leap of faith, and you can't help but be astounded when spirit meets you there.
Well, and to your point with animals, I have a funny animal story, but
Okay.
anyone who's ever had or known or loved an animal will know they certainly have personalities of their own, each one, and they certainly have likes and dislikes, and they really are little emotional souls as well. So why wouldn't they? I mean, it makes so much sense. Like, why wouldn't they? One of those early Reiki experiences, I had a handful of clients that had been with me a long time, and so I was more comfortable saying to them what I saw than someone I didn't know at all. And one of my first experiences was a horse. And I don't have horses. I don't know a lot about horses. I find them a little intimidating, to be quite honest. But I just was aware of this horse like snout right directly next to my face, so close. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to say this out loud to this person, because I had kind of committed to spirit at that point. You know, if I know this person, I will say whatever I receive. And I just the whole time was having that little argument conversation we were talking about like, can I start with something else? Is there something different? And I mean, this lady, she knows who she is. She's still in my world today, but I have this horse that's like intrusively close in my space, but in the most loving way. And she's like, oh my God, that's him. Like, so like you said, you know, we just have to trust that they know how to identify themselves and what the most identifying things are. And that language barrier thing is such a good point too, because, you know, on the other side, I remind people we don't have a physical voice box to speak a language with anyway. It's all through the emotion and through the, you know, the mental pictures and thought words and all those things. So how magical is that?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. It's so incredible. And just to focus on the material world, things get cold and quiet and lonely really quick. But when you realize that there's so much that you can encounter that you can't explain, or I don't pretend to know any of the answers. I often say I'm looking through this little peephole, pretending I can see all of the universe. And it's like, no, you got this little teeny glimpse. And even that can leave you awestruck. And that's where life gets interesting, when you can just expand and realize that at any given moment, this is happening and it's real and we're sharing it together, and you can manifest and create your own reality, pull things in your own reality, share it with others, affect other people. It is all magic when we look at things that way. And it's not just, oh, I forgot to put the trash cans out today.
I mean, I feel like it's so flat to be just in this 3D world. Yes, we have to live our human lives and have human experiences and feed our pets and take our trash out, all the things. But like you said, there's so much magic going on behind the scenes that, what's the saying? We can't always see it, but we can feel it with our heart, you know?
Yeah.
Just so special. I love the podcast that you share with the world. And these are the things we're talking about, are all the things that you demonstrate either through the spooky stories that you share or the actual readings themselves. There was something that I saw you do that I don't know if I've seen you do on every single episode, but you certainly do it sometimes. At the end, you become aware of a spirit person and you give some detail. And and then you kind of share it out and say whoever this, whoever understands this person. And again, like you were saying before, it's specific things. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
it's not just super general where it could be an umbrella and fit everybody. The one I just was listening to was like, because I was like, oh yeah, I lost a female friend at work. And then the rest, I was like, oh no, none of that is about her. So this is about someone else. Will you share a little bit about how that came to you to start doing?
Yeah, I call that segment Message from the Spirits. And again, it was just felt like it was suggested to me because doing in studio readings was sort of new to the podcast. And I had thought, well, I can do this if I don't have an in studio guest. But ultimately, that's really not a problem. But yes, every episode, I set the intention for someone listening to the podcast for a spirit to come close and go ahead and use this as a vehicle to connect, and spirit will know. And it might be 5 years down the road, it could be next week, but hopefully this message will connect with that individual. And it's always really interesting when it does, and people will reach out and say, that's my grandfather, that's my dad, that is definitely my mom. And it's usually just one person. It's not like 5 people are writing in and they're all arguing about grandmother being theirs or not. So it's something that I've been really encouraged to keep doing. And I know that in mediumship, one of the things discussed is you shouldn't reach out if your sitter's not with you. And it's like, well, this is playing with an intention, and lobbing it out there into timing and fate and synchronicity and seeing if it works. And again, it does. And that's just so delightful. And there are a few of those message from the spirits that haven't been claimed yet. But, when I think about that, it's like, just they haven't heard it yet. And that's fascinating that time in a way doesn't matter, and hopefully it will connect for them one day. But yeah, a lot of times it's just one person reaching out and saying, yeah, that's for me. And in fact, recently someone was like, I think you were describing my dog, and then you said the name Daisy, and I nearly fell in the grocery store because her name was Daisy. And it's like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, it's so great.
It's one of my favorite things about your work and about you, even though we're new friends. It's that you're having the inspiration and pushing the boundaries of what we can do with this work. I had a good friend who's a spiritual worker suggest something similar to me a handful of months back. And to be quite honest, I've been too scared to do it myself. Because just like you said, I was like, well, I don't consider, and I don't know. And I don't know if that, I feel integrity about that. And then listening to yours, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much integrity in this, in the way that you're doing it. It's absolutely beautiful. It's very specific. And it does go to, quote unquote, prove the intelligence of the spirit world, because not only are they sharing specific detail, but then they've got to get their person in the world to across the path of the podcast, and they've got to get them to listen that far towards the end, and they've got to, you know what I mean, get them to recognize them. So there is so much more going on behind the scenes than just the information being given.
Yeah. In a way, I like the fact that it's not up to me, sending it out there into the world like this little missive. And I'd encourage you to try it. I really would, because I understand how it's like, I'm just sitting in a room by myself. This is awkward. How is this going to work? And it's like, no, I just trust that when you open the space, someone will come in, you'll feel them and say, okay, tell me what you want to say. And I'm going to write it down. I often write down notes because the act of writing, it's an action. It's an action of trust. And it's like, see, I'm writing it down. So tell me more. Tell me more. Yeah. And it is really interesting. And let me just encourage you to do it, because I understand the awkwardness of it, and the how is it going to work. And it's like, give it a try. See what happens.
I really appreciate that. For me, I'm not so scared of the spirit people are there. I'm not worried about that part. As you know, I'm like, oh, if you say hello, there's a hello there. I was more concerned about how is this going to be received on the other end. Are people going to say like, oh, you're a fake, or you're,
Mm-hmm.
because I do obviously some client readings that I publish as well, but
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, oh, how is that going to be received? But to see you doing it, it's just, like I said, just so inspirational and so
Oh, thank you.
beautiful. I love the other segments as well, but that just stuck out to me as really
Thanks.
cool.
Yeah,
Pushing those edges, which I love.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. With skeptics, they made up their mind before they even met me. And go ahead. I want everyone to think what they want to think and be
Yeah,
comfortable with how they perceive things, but don't argue with people. It's not my place to try and convince anyone, and you're either interested and drawn to it or you're not. And if you're
for
not,
sure.
that has nothing to do with me and nothing to do with them. And there's room for everything. And you know there's plenty of space where I just when we have to defend our ideas, we're not trusting them because you're
Yeah,
trying to get validation from someone else. You're trying to make someone else agree with you. And it's like, just trust in yourself and what you believe in. And if something bothers you, explore why it bothers you
for
and
sure.
do that work. It's much more productive than arguing with the internet.
For sure. That's the phase I'm in with that question, is the personal development. Why? I always
Hmm.
say, like, anytime resistance rises up, that's an invitation to investigate.
Oh my gosh. And, I'm glad you brought that up because to study mediumship is all about that self classroom, right?
Yeah,
Any issue that you have to grow as a human being, mediumship will find it for you.
for sure.
And it's almost, I don't know if it's a test or what, but those classrooms exist. And it's like so many things. Like I said earlier, I grew up painfully shy, and then have to do a telephone call or a video call or meet someone I have absolutely no idea who they are, how they're going to be, if they're going to be mean or not or receptive. It's like, why did it have to be this classroom? But it's like, all right, I'm attending, I'm here, with love, I'm
Yeah,
here. And mediumship will do that to every medium. And I find that
100%. Yeah.
I find that fascinating too.
Well, and I think a lot of people don't realize how vulnerable the work is for us sometimes too, because we're, having to talk to these invisible people and say these things outside of ourselves, and it can feel a
Yeah.
little vulnerable as we grow and develop all along the way, I guess.
Yeah. Well, if anyone puts themselves in a situation where you're demonstrating how wrong you can be, I think people can quickly relate how awkward that can be. And it's
For
like,
sure.
why am I wrong? And like I said, it's so important to do a good job for the sitter, and then to get a no. Yeah, that could be ego and soul crushing and everything else, because it's like, no, I failed. And it's like, it's not a failure. Sit with it, figure it out,
Yeah,
give yourself the grace to find where the yes is in all of it. You know.
totally. And it is, you make such a wonderful point for anyone who's in beginning stages of development or thinking about developing. For me, anyway, a big part of my training was learning how to work with a no, not
Mm,
being afraid of it anymore. Once I got
mm-hmm.
over that hump of, like, oh, if it's no, to say no to me, that's fine. It just means I misunderstood something. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine. And you're
Oh,
right, it
yeah.
is a big growth point for us to
Yeah.
be able to
We,
not get totally blown apart by the no, right?
we can't be 100% correct all the
Yeah.
time. We get our wires crossed. We interpret things wrong. We're human. We're flawed. It's okay.
And that's what connects us all, right? All the
Yes.
humanness.
Messy.
Well, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I want to respect your time. Are you open to doing the spirit speed round? We haven't done it in a while here because haven't had guests since before the new year.
Brand new to me. It's like, yes, let's
But
give this a try.
you're my girl, pushing boundaries everywhere. I really love it. There are 4 questions. It's so we can get to know you a little better, and they're super easy. None of them are scary. The
Okay.
first question is, will you share with us one thing that really shocked you or was unexpected about your gifts as a medium?
one thing that really shocked me
Or was
is,
unexpected. Yeah.
yeah, unexpected. I wasn't expect I was not expecting to physically feel something. Like a reading I even had recently, I was sitting here quietly and I felt this pressure right here on my forehead. And I'm like, oh, this is not a coincidence. This is not just me. What is this? And then, like, it slowly lifted. And I asked my sitter, what is this? And she said, well, my grandmother was very religious and she used to drop me off for school every day. And she would put her hand on me and bless me and ask God to keep me safe and that she
Wow.
loved me. And shocking, just shocking when something like
Wow.
that comes through. And yeah, anytime something physical happens where you can physically feel it, it's wondrous and very shocking.
Wow. That's
Definitely.
really, and what a beautiful piece of that
Yeah.
reading, too.
Yeah.
Okay, if you got to spend a day in the spirit world, you got the full tour, you got to spend time with everyone who you've ever known, who's crossed over, and it's almost time to return to your human life here, and your guide tells you that you have 1 hour left and you can spend it with anyone who's on the other side. Who do you choose and why?
Oh, you're going to make me cry.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. And like pick one person? You can't do that.
But
You
you've
can.
already seen everyone. You've already spent
Okay.
the whole day there. You've already got to hang out with everyone.
Okay. Okay.
That's why I built it in that you already got to be with everyone you've
Yeah,
ever
that's
known
true.
that you
That's
wanted to
true.
spend time with.
I'm just all focused. I think it would just have to, it would have to be my stepdad because I miss him so much. Get that extra hour in, certainly. Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for going to that vulnerable place with us.
No problem.
Even though we have spiritual gifts, we have very human lives. What's one quirky thing about you that people might be surprised to learn?
Oh boy. All right, I won't get too quirky, but
Girl, be as quirky as you want. We're quirky over here. Don't even worry.
it would take me too long to figure out too much. But I think this is really interesting. Everyone is always complimenting me on my voice. I cannot sing. And I love singing and I cannot carry a tune at all. And so I
That's
think
so
that that's a
funny.
quirky little thing that comes to mind first.
Yeah,
If
I love it. It's a good one. And there's one more. The last one is, will you leave us with a pearl of wisdom? What's one piece of advice that you wish that you had had early on in your understanding of your gifts?
um I think that one piece would just be, I can't emphasize enough how much trust and faith is involved. And the more you have, the greater your gifts can shine because you're getting out of your own way. And just support yourself, do everything with love. And if there's something that's frightening you, come back to loving yourself first, figuring out why it scares you and how you can support yourself and how you can love yourself. Because when we love ourselves first, boy, is it easy to turn it around and shine it on the person in front of you, give it to the spirit world, be that bigger beacon. It's just, I know it's a little corny to say it's all
Not
about
at
love.
all.
It's just all about love.
Wow.
And that includes loving yourself. And it starts there. And when we love, we can trust. And when we trust, we're open. And the more we can be open, the more we can share and connect with the spirit world and those who are connected to us in life as well.
Oh, I think that's a beautiful pearl of wisdom. Thank you. That's so special. And you're right. So often forgotten that if there's anything we're having a tough time with, just love ourselves and support ourselves through it. We tend
Yeah.
to push so hard, you know.
Yeah, we tell ourselves, "Oh, I shouldn't feel this way," or we're denying ourselves something, or we're judging ourselves over something. When in truth, we should just love it, and we should love ourselves, and come at it that way.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing yourself and your gifts and your wisdom with us. Of course, your podcast is I Talk to Ghosts. I will link Jennifer Page's podcast and website. And on the website, you tell people also how they can submit to potentially get a reading with you on your
Absolutely.
show, all the details are there. I'm sure they
Mhm.
can also submit their very own spooky haunted stories
Yes.
that you will read with that beautiful voice. So make sure to
Thank you.
check the show notes for how to contact Jennifer. And thank you so much for shining your light.
Thanks so much for sharing this time with me.
I appreciate you. Well, what a fun conversation. I feel like it's so nice to get to share time and space with someone who is on the same wavelength, who so openly shares her gifts. I got a little advice from myself, as you guys heard, and I just adore her pearl of wisdom about how to love and support ourselves as sensitives and mediums and empaths and light workers. We so often are focused on everyone else, and we can really forget that if something is feeling scary or challenging or new or intimidating to us, that really is the way through. And I just think she is such a special, bright light. I told her so many times that I was really honored to get to speak to her and for her to share this time with us. I hope that you have learned something and have had your mind opened or moved in a new way. I really recommend her podcast, I Talk to Ghosts. It's a lot of fun. And as we were joking about, her voice really is so lovely to listen to. And she, as I mentioned, reads the haunted stories herself. And so you get to listen to her voice quite a bit on her podcast, which is so nice. She has such a relaxing voice. I find myself often having it on just in the background when I'm doing things around my space. So thank you for being here with me. As always, we will continue to grow and expand and have so many fun, new, exciting things coming as this year continues to unfurl for all of us. And so much love and gratitude to Jennifer and to each of you who is here with me inside Spirit Speakeasy. Big hugs, lots of love. See you next time.